Hello, everybody. Dale will be with you in just a second, just to start the conversation here. My name is Will Guyatt, and I'm going to be doing my very best to try and get this running today. Keep it moving through the next hour. We've got a ton of questions for Dale already. You can submit your questions here. We're also broadcasting live on Facebook too, to the Forest Green Rovers page, to Dale Vince's page, and also to the Ecotricity page. So if you've got questions about anything you think Dale will answer, anything you're interested in finding out about Dale, he obviously started the world's first green energy company back in 1995, became the chairman of Forest Green Rovers in 2010, is now a UN climate champion for sport, and he's also pretty mean at the video game Fortnite too. So without further ado, hopefully the technology works and Dale will magically appear in front of you in a second. But let's see if this works. Good afternoon, Dale.
Yeah, I'm here, but I can't see me on your screen. Can you hear me?
Marvelous. You'll need to turn your video on, I'm afraid. You'll need to go and turn that on. This is the wonders of modern technology, but we're testing this for the first time. So thank you for joining us. Here he is. There's Dale turning up. No. Coming back into your chair.
Cool, so thank you.
This is completely...
I don't think I can live up to the Fortnite rep, by the way. Everything else fine, but I'm not sure about that part.
This is completely open to everybody, so do get your questions in. Get your questions in on, you can raise your hand on Zoom if you know how to do that. You can send me a message on Zoom through the chat function, or if you're watching on Facebook, you can put a comment and my amazing colleague Katrina is going to let me know. Just going to start off with a few random questions and then we'll go into some of the questions we've already had. How are you finding lockdown, Dale?
It's interesting. I'd say I'm enjoying it on the whole. It's brought with it a kind of, a bunch of challenges. There are a lot of challenges from work, a lot of things to do, but being at home just about all of the time has given me a kind of an ability to really intensely kind of focus on that kind of stuff. And I'm pretty confident that we'll come out of the lockdown stronger than we went in as an organization.
In terms of coronavirus, this is obviously just sort of breaking, as it were, but how has it affected Ecotricity as a business?
Well, it's had a big effect on us in some obvious ways, like, for example, sending about 700 people to work from home. We did that over a period of about a week to 10 days. That was a big challenge. It's been a really interesting experience as well, people working from home. There have been some challenges in the energy market. Business demand dropped off a small cliff, I would say. Domestic consumption has gone up a little bit, but not as much. Prices in the market collapsed at one point. That brought some challenges of its own. So I think probably the doubt and the fear in the country has been the hardest part to handle. But that settled down within a week or two, and things seem to be fairly stable. I mean, my feeling right now is that we're on the way out of lockdown. It's a question of when and how that happens, but it's definitely coming. And there's a pathway to normality somewhere between now and when there's a vaccine. That's the period that we've got to manage, where we've got to mitigate risk. We've got to bring people back to work when it's safe to do so, get our football season back on in the same way. So that's how I see it. It's kind of not over, but we can see that that point in time is coming.
Lots of people are already asking about your thoughts on the football season. When do you think it's back? Do you think there will be an end to our season for Forest Green?
I think it's entirely possible. There is a lot of speculation in the media of the last week or so that Leagues 1 and 2 seasons will be cancelled and that there'll be a vote soon on that by the EFL. It's the kind of only place I'm hearing it. I'm not hearing it from other clubs or from the EFL, and I really hope that it doesn't happen. And it wouldn't make sense to me to do it now, because on Sunday the government said football can, live sport in fact, can come back behind closed doors from the 1st of June, provided that all of the other situations, the tests, the 5 tests they've got to apply to the country are looking good. And the Premier League, I think, will make an announcement later this week in respect of their own plans, which is to restart in early June. I think it's never been more probable that we can get back to football in June than it is now. And so it'd be the wrong time to cancel. So I hope it doesn't happen.
Yeah, that's great. Just to remind everybody watching, you can get your questions in. If you're in Zoom, you can raise your hand or send a chat request in Zoom. If you're watching on Facebook, on any of the channels we're on, put a comment on the post and we'll do our best to answer those. The first question is from Christy Bofer at Stellenbosch Academy of Sport in South Africa. And I think Christy is watching this afternoon as well. Two quick questions for you, Dale. What was the hardest thing you had to do to get to where you are today? And name one ability that has made you this successful.
Oh. Well, look, hi, Christy. We know each other. We've met. You were here with your team, just to explain to people, a few months ago, bringing a pretty unique program to Forest Green Rovers, which we think we've started to see the benefit of, but we only played one game at the other side of that. So we'll keep quiet about that for now. The hardest thing to do, I think, is really just to persuade people that what it is that needs to be done does need to be done and is possible to do. I think that's been consistent through my whole journey of the last 20 or 30 years. You know, the need to fight climate change, the need for renewable energy, the realistic prospect of being 100% powered that way, electrifying transport and moving to a plant-based diet. These are all examples of the same kind of thing. And I would say the great ability that I have that's helped me through this time is just total stubbornness. That's just it's a superpower.
Here's one from Ethan Slater in Derbyshire and several others, including Bill. They want to know what plans are in place to improve the reliability and user friendliness of the electric highway. Where are the 350 kilowatt chargers? When is contactless payment coming? Are you adding more CCS to your network? And what's going on with your faulty pumps? We can break that down if you want.
Well, that's a lot of questions. And I know there's been some anxiety and some criticism, you know, from a group of EV users around our pumps. So I just want to kind of set up some perspective, perhaps for everybody here. We built the network starting in 2011, so 9 years ago. We were the very first to do that, perhaps one of the first in the world. And as a consequence of that, the technology that we built is now the oldest in the country. We also built it in the busiest locations in the country. So if and when we do have problems, they're the worst places to have a problem, on the motorway, for example. So we've got a combination of early adopter, old tech, and very important locations. But we watch the data all of the time. You know, we can see the load factor of our network in terms of how many pumps we need so that people don't have to queue up. We can see the failure rates. And I think there's a lot of anecdotal chat about the electric highway and how it's unreliable and stuff like that. That's not borne out in the data. Having said that, we have had problems with about 30 pumps. We replaced half of those already. We were underway replacing the second half before the lockdown hit, and that's made that impossible to continue with. So we've identified the worst performing pumps in our network of 300 for replacement. I'd also say that you know, we're delivering 1.5 million miles of clean driving every month from 300 pumps. The closest competitor that there is in the country has 7,000 pumps and delivers less. And that just is a way for me to demonstrate the busyness of our pumps. We have the most busy pumps in the country in the most important locations. And I think that puts us very much in the public eye, particularly when there are problems. So that's for perspective. 350 kilowatt chargers, I would say, where are the 350 kilowatt capable cars? There aren't any. So let's not get ahead of ourselves. Our network is built on 50 kilowatts at the moment, which was the fastest standard for a very long time. 150 kilowatts is going to be the new fastest, most common standard that's starting to be rolled out now. I think there are 2 350 kilowatt sites in the country. They've been built by Ionity, which is a consortium of the world's biggest car manufacturers. So you might expect them to be ahead of the game in terms of tech, but there are no cars that can use it. So that we don't need to rush into this. It will cost millions of pounds to deploy this hardware, and it doesn't make sense to do it for cars that aren't there yet that can use it. What we do need to do is to continue to increase the availability of the 50 kilowatt chargers. There are 100,000 cars on the road today, electric cars in Britain, and very few of those can use 150 kilowatts. None can use 350 kilowatts. So we've got to focus on where most people need charging, what most people need. We are supporting all three standards at the moment. I think it will coalesce into CCS. We started with CHAdeMO and Type 2, and yes, we will add more CCS. So I think I covered most of the questions in there, Will.
Yeah, there's a supplementary question from Bill, who's having problems with his Kona on CCS. When are we going to fix these incompatibilities with certain vehicles and CCS?
We've been working on that since the beginning of the problems, really. You know, we worked on them with Jaguar as well, and quite often we're blamed for that. It's you know, we're the easy people to point the finger at. You know, it's the electric highway again. But actually, these have been car side issues, because our use of the CCS standard, it was long standing before these new models came along, and we've worked with these manufacturers to identify the car side issues. Often it requires the upgrade of some kind of firmware in the car in order to solve the problem. So I would say these are not always on our side, the incompatibilities, and the new models that are coming to market often are compatible with the old implementation of CCS. That's the problem, but it's something that we have to deal with together as an industry, and we are.
We've got some people raising their hands in the Zoom room. I'll come to you guys in a second. Here's one from Facebook. You can comment beneath the videos on Facebook. Louisa Sassa, what's with the skull and crossbones behind you?
Oh, well, that's the flag of Sea Shepherd, which is a partner of ours. I'm a patron of the UK arm of that. It's a global organization. And if you've never heard of them, check them out on the internet. Led by a man called Captain Paul Watson. They've done an amazing job protecting marine life. I think it really began with whales for them, but it's become much bigger. I met them maybe 10 years ago when they had one ship. They've now got a navy, in fact, the largest private navy in the world, and they campaign all over the world to protect marine life. They're an amazing group of people. It's also on the shirt of Forest Green Rovers on the back. And we fly their flag at our games as well. We do what we can to support their work.
Adrian Bryan in the room, you can ask Dale your question. And this is where we wait and hope Adrian is going to ask his question. Adrian, you're going to ask your question?
Can you hear me?
I can hear you now, yeah.
Yeah, I just had to unmute my mic. Sorry, I'm working at the same time.
Always the way.
Hi, Dale. Thanks for doing this.
Yeah, hi, Adrian.
I had two, if that's okay. First one was, I was wondering why the market isn't more focused on hydrogen cars as opposed to battery-powered cars, because it's a good renewable energy source, and it would sort of get rid of the need to deal with batteries after their useful life. Yeah,
there's a lot of hype around hydrogen, and I think it's driven by the oil and gas companies, because they can pivot their infrastructure into a world of hydrogen. They have big refineries where they can make it, tankers to carry it up and down roads, and garages where they can store it and dispense it. But actually the practicalities of hydrogen are severely limited. I think the worst aspect for me is the round trip fuel efficiency of hydrogen, which is about 50%. So if you use renewable energy, which is often the case cited, let's use spare renewable energy to make hydrogen, use it as a means of storing energy, then either make electricity with it or drive cars with it with electricity. The round trip efficiency, electric to hydrogen to electric, is 50%, which is incredibly wasteful. And it means we need almost twice as much fuel that way as if we use batteries. The other issue is that 95% of all hydrogen today in Britain is made from fossil fuels. So it would require quite a revolution in the way hydrogen is made. I honestly don't think that it's a sensible or serious technology, but it won't go away because it's hyped by the oil companies and you know, the media like the story. It makes no sense to me that we're looking past battery cars because they've just become so practical and affordable with great ranges and stuff like that. Why are we looking for some magic answer? We have it. That's what I would say.
And what's your next
I was thinking if we made hydrogen from renewable sources, it would save batteries, but I didn't realise they only had the 50% efficiency on them. So
yeah, thank you. With a battery, you get more like 90-95% just for context. So there's a world of difference, and in a world where we need to conserve energy as well as create it renewably, that's going to be a big backward step.
I've got one more as well, if that's okay.
Yeah, shoot. Yeah.
So I'm a Wrexham season ticket holder. We play in the National League. With your experience in football and the current financial crisis, Do you think it's feasible going forwards to still have 100+ professional clubs in the pyramid?
Yeah, I do. I think it is feasible. I think that there needs to be some kind of wage control. I'm a fan of the idea of a wage cap or a squad size limit. These two ideas are being kicked around by the EFL at the moment. I think mostly just to bring some sustainability to the leagues to prevent the kind of issues that have happened with clubs like Bury and Bolton most recently, for example. So I think it's possible we can all come out of this and we can sustain this level of football. I mean, it's an incredibly popular sport in our country. I just think it needs a little bit more control than it's currently got.
Thanks for your questions, Adrian. That's great. Here's one from the Forest Green Rovers Facebook, Dale, from Nikolai Rachev in Bulgaria. He says, Dale, apart from all these serious themes you're talking about, can you tell me what's your favorite vegan dish? I'm seriously asking because I'd like to cook it and try it in the next few days.
Well, my favorite right now, you can't get in Bulgaria. In fact, you can't get outside of a Forest Green football game. So it's the shiitake mushroom balls that are made by the Devil's Kitchen. And I kind of like it with gluten-free spaghetti and tomato sauce. That's my favorite dish right now. Other than that, I'm just a big fan of chips and all other forms of vegetable, but chips are my favorite.
We've actually had a message from Tina as well, wanting to know when you're going to make that food available, the Forest Green Rovers food. Are you going to sell it outside of Forest Green, outside of Nailsworth?
Yeah, we are, as soon as possible. And yeah, before the lockdown, we were making some great progress, talking to some national chains, supermarkets, online grocers, that kind of stuff, about getting it packaged and available to people. We'll get back to that. I mean, we haven't given up on it. We're continuing to make the progress that we can and need to. And I would hope in the autumn that we'll have the burgers and the balls out there in the world and available to buy.
And impatiently, Nick, the fan on Facebook, has asked several times now, refunds ASAP. Are you avoiding talking about the issue of refunds for Forest Green Rovers fans? No, we're not avoiding it. So what's the answer to that, Dale? When's that happening?
We're waiting to see what the EFL does collectively as a body. We're also waiting to see if the season comes back on, because that would make a big difference as well. So we're not rushing into a decision, and I haven't really kind of picked up the need to do so from anybody. I know that it's an open question, but there's a lot of open questions around in football at the moment, and that's one of them. But I mean, if you've got a particular issue yourself and you need a refund, get in touch with us.
Any more questions from the room? If you're in Zoom, don't forget you can raise your hand or you can send me a message in chat. A couple of questions that have come in pre today's chat. Here's one from Karen in York. Would you try to convince a friend or family member that less meat consumption is the way to go, heading towards being a full vegan? Have you got any tips on how to encourage someone?
I do, and I have encouraged most of my family, I think, actually, including wider family, are on that path. And I guess in my experience, it's really been about talking about the conditions that animals are raised in, the way that they're treated, and actually it can even start with the very basic that, you know, these products that have been sanitized and presented to us in a very clean, shrink-wrapped kind of packaged way, they are actually pieces of animal. You know, they're the bodies of animals, and you know that can be surprising to kids, for example. But then you've got to talk about farming and the way animals are treated, the slaughter process, that kind of stuff. That's one aspect, I think. You know, it's basically animal rights, and is it right to treat animals this way and kill them for food when actually we don't need it? Then there's the climate issue. You know, animal farming, intensive animal farming, is one of the 3 big drivers of climate change in the world, and it's an incredibly inherently inefficient way to make food. We have to feed much more plant protein to an animal to get much less animal protein out the other end. And then there's a health issue that, you know, these products, they are bad for human health. The World Health Organization has categorized some red meat products in the same list as tobacco for being carcinogenic, for example, and the evidence of the health impacts of meat just grows every day. It's linked to heart disease, cancer, obesity, the chronic illnesses that affect the Western world more than anywhere else in old age. They're all linked to meat eating. So from my perspective, there's a lot of things you can talk about, but it boils down to how we treat animals, the impact we're having on the world, and our own human health and the quality of life that we'll have in later life if we continue with a diet like that. It's a long-winded answer, but that's
here's one from James Murray White. Is it not hypocritical to donate to the Green Party one election, then switch to Labour the next, while still claiming you're a Green?
Well, we didn't switch. We try to support progressive candidates and progressive parties where we can. So given money to the Lib Dems as well, supported Ed Davey a couple of elections ago, for example, and Caroline Lucas in Brighton. And we're partners with the Green Party. We work together as an energy company, and we've supported Labour as well throughout that. I mean, all of these parties have something in common. They're progressive. They support renewable energy and the fight against climate change. And these are the kinds of politicians that we need to see elected.
Heading back to the questions on Zoom in a second, Lee Forster says, where does all your green energy come from? I'm thinking about switching. And if part of your energy mix comes from the incineration of waste, it's not green or renewable. And all these so-called green energy companies seem to do this incineration of waste.
I agree, they do, and we don't. We have very clear policies against the use of waste, whether it's by incineration or any other means, actually. We likewise have clear policies against animal parts, animal body parts and animal effluent being used to make electricity and gas. It's a scandal we exposed maybe 2 years ago now, I think, maybe 18 months in Britain. Millions of people are being powered by electricity and gas made from offal, from the output of fish farms, for example, or slaughterhouses, or effluent from intensive pig farms. And this crept into the supply chain of energy. So we launched, we exposed the scandal, and then we obtained the Vegan Society accreditation mark for our power and gas. We went through a very extensive process of proving none of this was in our mix. And we launched the concept of vegan energy, which is a kind of new frontier for vegans or people that care about animal rights issues and stuff like that. So in all the time we've been doing this, had very clear principles about what we will and we won't use. Energy crops is another great example. We think that's wrong. It creates monocultures, it's bad for wildlife, and it competes for food production, farmland for food production. And we don't need to be growing crops to burn them to make energy when we've got enough wind and sun to power the whole country, probably 12 times over.
Once we finish at 2 o'clock, you can go to ecotricity.co.uk and you can switch there in a couple of minutes. Sales plug over. This next one is part statement, part question from Gordon McFarlane on Facebook Live. Climate change is a natural occurrence. It's going to happen. And yes, we're right to try and mitigate, but eco-nutters are just as bad as any extreme organization. Take electric cars, for example, from well to wheel, no cleaner, and in many cases worse than existing ICE technology. And I'm not a petrol head. What do you think?
I think that's nonsense, actually. The electric car example is nonsense. From well to wheel, they are much cleaner. I think there has been the odd study of electric cars in particular locations like parts of America, which are coal-fired electricity grids. And when you take an electric car running on coal-fired electricity, yes, it's worse than a petrol car. It's an extreme example. In Britain, 30% of our electricity already comes from renewables. And if you compare an electric vehicle on the grid mix or on pure renewables, which is possible to do, the electric highway is 100% green, then they are head and shoulders cleaner and better than petrol or diesel cars. And it's not just carbon emissions, it's the other particulates and forms of pollution that affect people's breathing and quality of life, and efficiency as well, because the fuel efficiency of an internal combustion car is somewhere between 15 and 20%. It's terrible. If renewable energy had anything like that going on, it would be screamed about by climate change deniers and anti-renewable energy people. The internal combustion engine is an incredibly inefficient, dirty way to travel. That's a fact.
Here's one from Rachel Kent. There's a lot of conversation over social media on prioritising a green UK economic recovery post-COVID. Do you feel optimistic that there will be actual tangible change or policies put in place to tackle climate change?
Hi, Rachel. I mean, we're one of those voices. We want to see change come out of this. It seems obvious to me that, because we have to rebuild our economy, there's no doubt that we have to do that. Then there's no doubt in my mind that we shouldn't build it the way it used to be. We should build a new one, because at the same time as creating jobs and, economic benefit, we can actually take steps to fight the climate change, the climate crisis. Am I optimistic? Yes, I'm always optimistic. I think we're going to have to work for it. We're going to have to push for it, but the opportunity's there, and I really do believe that this government, even this government, will see that, and they will put the money, our money, in fact, into the renewable energy industry, electrification, energy efficiency, all of those great things that can create jobs and economic growth. In effect, it's a new industrial revolution. It's a green one, and I think this is our best opportunity ever to see that happen.
Still chance to ask your questions to Dale. Hello to the 150 or so of you across all the Facebook pages watching. Thanks to the people in the Zoom room as well. This is one for Nicola Edward Rawlings. Hello Dale, lovely to see you. How do we persuade government parties to work together and only invest in clean energy? We have such a clear statement from the planet that things need to change fast.
Yeah, hi Nicola, thanks for the question. I think the only party missing from the party in that respect is the Conservatives. I think all of the other parties, I mean, I'm ignoring the Brexit parties, but if you look, Lib Dems, Greens, and Labour, they're all on the same page. We need to fight climate change. We need renewable energy and a host of other measures. And I think it's only the Conservative Party that we need to drag into this mindset. But I think it's going to happen. I really do.
Couple here from Jasper on Facebook. What's more important for humans to change? Move to clean energy or adopt a vegan diet? And secondly, what do you look for when hiring at Ecotricity?
For me, the three big areas of focus are energy, transport, and food. It's how we power ourselves. It needs to be with renewable energy, not fossil fuels. It's how we travel. We need to electrify transport. And it's what we eat. We need to swap animals for plants. It's not any more complicated than that. And within those three areas of life, we all make decisions every day. 80% of our personal carbon footprints is accrued there in the decisions that we make. And there are choices that we can make, changes that we can make. Changing our diet is actually one of the easiest and biggest in combination. The range of vegetarian, vegan products that are out there now has never been bigger. It's enormous, and they are appearing in all kinds of mainstream, unexpected places. Switching to green energy is pretty straightforward. Obviously, getting an electric car requires you to be able to afford one. So within all of these areas of life, there are choices that some people can make and some people can't make. But diet is a choice that we can all make, and it's affordable to everybody. And it's just important that we all get started. What do we look for? I think we look for honesty, openness, enthusiasm, and ability. We like to find all of those qualities in people. And you don't have to be an eco person. You don't have to be on mission to work here. But what I've found in the years of doing this is that you'll probably become that if you come to work at Ecotricity. The mission grows on people, and what we have as a result is nearly 700 people, most of whom are really passionate about the work that we're doing and the need to do it. And that's a fantastic outcome. It's a great place to work.
Here's a fact for you, Dale, from Facebook, from Jonathan Porterfield. I want to know if you know this one or not. Orkney has been producing electricity over 100% green since 2013 from wind and tide.
Well, I didn't know that specific fact. I knew those things were happening up there. Obviously, it's a small population, so it's relatively easy to do, let's say, compared to doing it for London, for example. But yeah, it's a great thing. And I guess Orkney's connected to the grid up there, which also helps because you can get rid of your excess and bring in when you've got a shortfall, which is something that the grid does well. And we need interconnectors between different countries in order to achieve that 100% renewable energy powered grid in the future, as well as we need smart grid technologies like grid scale battery storage, home scale as well, and smart devices and stuff like that. So I think 100% renewable energy production and consumption is possible on a small scale in a place like Orkney. That's relatively easy to do. It's possible on a countrywide and a worldwide basis as we adapt the grid that we have today into a smart grid and as we build more renewables. So well done, Orkney, I would say, and let's bring everywhere else up to speed.
Here's one from Ollie on Facebook. I'm going to put you on the spot here. How much more should flights cost? And do you envision a flight industry that is renewable?
Yeah, this is not on the spot. This is an easy topic to talk about. I think the airline industry should not be subsidized. I think that immediately fuel duty should apply to airplanes in the same way that it does to cars. I don't see why it shouldn't. I don't think we should have duty-free at airports. That's just another perk. We don't have them at bus stops, and yet we encourage people to take public transport in order to fight climate change. Why do we encourage people to fly? Why do we make it so cheap that you can fly to Europe for less than the cost of a train to London? And it causes people to do that for a couple of days and then come home again. None of that makes sense to me. I think flying is actually, without the support, an inherently expensive business, and it's inherently damaging as well. And those two things should travel together, and that would control the amount of flying that happens in the world. So we just got to stop the perverse subsidies for flying, and I think the situation will start to balance itself out. In terms of renewable flight industry, I think electric planes are coming. Boeing and Airbus have said in 10 years they expect to be running short-haul electric flights. I think long-haul may never happen, but we don't need to electrify long-haul flights. We can make synthetic jet fuel. We can actually make it from the atmosphere. We can take carbon from the air and turn it into jet fuel. It costs, I don't know, maybe 20, 30 times more to make it that way than to dig it out of the ground, but that's fine, because I think long-haul flights are essential for some things. We should try to keep that if we can, but we should make sure it's properly carbon neutral by using something like synthetic jet fuel. And it's going to cost a lot more to do, but it has to, because it's costing the earth at the moment.
Next one for you. The comments are moving so quickly now. I lost that one. Peter Chaddock, have you actually watched Planet of the Humans yet, Dale? If you haven't, then don't comment on it.
I haven't, but I will comment on it because I've read plenty about it, and it just seems to be a really deceptive piece of work, rooted in stuff that happened 10 years ago. I mean, for example, the Chevy Volt. We all know what happened with that. It's just an old story. It's not relevant to today. And I don't think that film at all is relevant to today. So, and lots of people have seen it, and I've seen a list of the glaring inaccuracies and the deceptions that are in that film. I think it's a terrible, shocking piece of work, and Mr. Moore should be ashamed of it.
Beth Wilson says, hi Dale, hope you're keeping well. I heard on your Zero Carbonista podcast about your biography. Any update on that? When do you reckon it's going to be published, and where will I be able to buy it?
It's on my to-do list, actually. You just reminded me. We've kind of almost nailed one chapter out of maybe 12, I'm not sure. I think before the lockdown, we had a program or a timetable that would see us try to complete this maybe by May or something like that. And we were looking to launch for the summer, maybe get into some book fairs and stuff like that. So that'll be slightly in disarray now. And I've got a good half a dozen draft chapters at home that I've got to spend some time on. So thanks for the reminder. It's on my to-do list. I think we're probably looking at the autumn. That would be my guess. And we'll probably do some virtual book fairs. That was your idea, Will. It's a great idea. So it's coming.
I've lost the name of the person who sent this because we're now getting so many questions. Everybody's come to this late. Oh, it was Louisa. How do you feel about vaccines as a vegan?
Oh, I didn't realize there was a kind of vegan issue to vaccines. Yeah, I mean, I didn't realize. So I probably don't really understand the question.
Okay, Lee Stewart says, what are your views on Extinction Rebellion and other activist groups? Does activism have a big part to play in shaping a greener future?
Yeah, my views are overwhelmingly positive. I think what Extinction Rebellion have done, what Greta and the School Strikes for Climate Change have done, and Fridays for Future is fantastic. They've really brought the climate crisis to the attention of a lot of people. They've made it kind of unavoidable, inescapable. The Extinction Rebellion in particular brought people out on the streets that have never protested before, probably in their lives. and they've made the crisis accessible to a lot of people. We need that level of awareness, that level of concern, and that kind of desire for change, and we need politicians to really feel that and see that to give us a hope of changing, because we've got the technology that we need to solve this problem. We just need to change policies to put support in the right places, take it away from fossil fuels and put it into renewable energy. And you know, we can solve this problem, and we can all actually live a far better life this way with you know, cleaner air, a huge improvement to human health, as well as animal welfare, a return of wildlife, and all that kind of stuff. You know, there's a great future waiting for us. We've just got to move away from burning things, end the old last industrial revolution and start the new one.
Kate Ann on Facebook, if you're watching on Facebook, all 150 so of you, you've still got time to put a comment on there, put it under the video, and we'll try and do our best to get to it, but we're getting quite a lot of them now. Kate Ann says, we are vegan and use Ecotricity as our electric provider. When will you be able to provide a vegan sustainable gas supply?
Yeah, thanks for that. We've been working on our own plans for green gas mills for quite a while. We brought green gas to Britain in 2010 as a concept and as a product, actually. And then it was being made with waste from a sugar beet factory. So, you know, bits of sugar beet anaerobically digested and turned into gas to put in the grid. We've come up with a way to make green gas that could have a really significant impact on the country. It's using grass. So it's not an energy crop per se, and it's not a form of waste, which both of which are to be avoided. We took a quick look at DEFRA data. There's enough marginal grassland in Britain to grow enough grass to make enough gas to power all 26 million homes in Britain, not competing with food use land or anything like that. In the process, would create 75,000 jobs in the rural economy, avoid the burning of something like £6 billion worth of fossil fuel gas every year. Much of that leaves our country because we make less than half, or dig up less than half of the gas we need every year now, and create vast areas of wildlife on an unprecedented scale, wildlife areas, I should say, because the land we use to grow grass and mow it just twice a year would be organic. And the only byproduct from these green gas mills is actually fertilizer that we can use for food production and you know, avoid using fossil fuel produced fertilizers. So we have our first project in the pipe, so to speak, and we were going to hopefully start work on it this year. The lockdown has shifted the timetable slightly. We're still working on it, still making the progress that we can, but I would anticipate not physically starting work until the spring next year, probably, but hoping to bring it online next year. And we'll be making for the first time green gas made from grass in Britain and showing how that can be done. In the meantime, I think we've got maybe 5% green gas in our mix. The rest is fossil gas at the moment. And what we've done is carbon neutralize that through UN carbon offsetting programs, which is kind of something I'm not completely easy with offsetting. I think it's, as long as it's a means to an end and very short term, it's acceptable, but it's not the answer to the problem. So we've got carbon neutralized gas at the moment with a little bit of green content, but our own green gas is coming.
Thank you. Here's one from Dave Hemmings, who's on Zoom. He wants to know, Dave, what are Forestry and Rovers' plans and expectations for your international fan clubs?
Oh, I think we sent a communication out in the last week or so, actually, to the International Fan Club, just to let them know that stuff was coming. We've asked them a couple of questions. We've got some emerging thoughts on how we can engage with them. It's a great audience of people. I think we've heard from about 100 different countries in the world now where people have set up fan clubs of Forest Green. And I'm just really excited about it because what I can see through that, apart from the reach of the message of Forest Green, which is exciting, is that we seem to have created a different kind of football fan, not just a different kind of football club, because the people that are getting in touch with us, some of them are football fans, a lot of them are environment fans, and some of them are a bit of both. And one of the things we always wanted to achieve here was to speak to a football audience and a wider sporting audience, and to harness the passion of sports fans and make them become fans of the environment, get them to become fans of the environment, and you know, use that in order to drive change. And I can see that happening. So I'm very excited about it. Concrete steps probably will come out in the next couple of weeks. We certainly hope to have something up and running before the season starts again, or starts again, the current one, which should be in early June, I hope.
Here's one from Sam Watson. Hi, Dale. Thanks very much for hosting this today. There's a large number of EVs coming into the automotive sector and a clear push from manufacturers towards greener cars. How do you see Ecotricity supporting this move going forward? Will there be new jobs at Ecotricity specific to the automotive sector?
Yeah, that's an interesting question. I mean, totally electrification of cars is the direction of travel. It might be 10 years from now, I think, before you won't be able to buy a conventional car, and that may accelerate, but currently that's my prediction, 10 years. I don't think that we'll be doing a massive amount more in terms of electrification. Our history in electric cars goes back to about 2008 when we built the Nemesis, Britain's first electric car, actually, when you couldn't buy an electric car in the world. And our experience of putting that on the road around about 2010, it took 2 years to build, showed us that what was missing was charging infrastructure. And just at that same time, the big motor manufacturers began to talk about electric cars. Nissan launched the Leaf and that kind of stuff. And so we realized that we were no longer needed in the manufacturing of cars. That was happening and coming, and we moved into infrastructure. And I think, you know, I could see the same happening with charging infrastructure as well. I mean, there are, I don't know if there are 10, maybe even 20 different charging networks in the country now. Everybody's piling in. There are lots of money men from the city piling in, creating networks, promising big things and exciting things and that kind of stuff. And so it's becoming a kind of very popular mainstream space. And that's not the place that we need to be. That's not the place where we do our best work. So I don't think we'll be doing a lot more in that sector.
Thanks, Dale. I think there's a sudden influx of EV users to the Facebook chat right now. So I'm going to bring a few of these questions together. Now, we may have answered these already for some, but let's do them again. What are your immediate and near future plans for the electric highway? There's no denying that you helped early EV adoption, and I'm yet to have had a bad experience myself, but many would say you're falling behind compared to other networks.
Yeah, some people do say that, but actually I do think a lot of that's anecdote and it's repeated. It goes around in circles on social media, and for some people that becomes reality. And we did talk about this earlier. The reality of that is, is non-existent in the data. We have the busiest charging network in the country. We have some problems with some older pumps. We've replaced half of them. We're going to replace the other half. We'd like to move to contactless, but when we got started and when we built most of our 300 pumps, contactless just didn't exist in the world. So we want to take that step, but we have a good app and we have good pumps in good locations. And I'll say it's working well. Our ambition is always has been to keep pace, to be slightly ahead of the demand curve so that we provide the ability for people to charge their cars, which is to encourage people to adopt electric cars in the first place. What we set out to do in 2011 was to kickstart the electric car revolution in Britain. I think we've done that, but we always are conscious that we need to stay ahead of that demand curve in order not to be a barrier to the take-up of electric cars. And I know some people say we now are a barrier. I hear that. I see that on social media. I think it's not true.
Final EV question for now, and then we'll move on to some other bits and pieces. When are you going to have CCS at all of your charges? You promised this years ago.
I don't think I promised it years ago, but it requires a big investment as we replace pumps. So the 30 that I mentioned that were our worst performing pumps, we've replaced half of those already. As we replace them with CCS, triple headers actually, so that we can support all three standards. You mustn't forget that this whole industry began on different standards, Type 2 and Charter Mo, and those cars are still on the road. They still want charging as well. So we replace now with triple headers. That's a pump with 3 different nozzles to charge 3 different kinds of car. And it comes at a big cost as well. And we've got to balance the cost of doing that with the demand that we're seeing as well for that. CCS is no doubt the emerging standard. I think it will be the one standard left in a few years' time. At the moment, for people that don't know, CCS is a European standard, I would say, de facto, and Charter Mo is a Japanese standard, and Type 2 is an old, very slow standard for charging, which I think will fall away first. I think Charter Mo will fall away very soon, and we'll be left only really needing CCS, except for backwards compatibility. Some of these cars are going to be on the road for a long time. So yeah, We get it, CCS. It needs to be everywhere, but that requires an investment now of several £1 million. I'd say the electric highway is a loss-making venture. A lot of people wouldn't know that, but all networks in the UK are loss-making. I don't care who owns them, where they are. That's a fact because of the relatively low number of electric cars on the road today, 100,000 out of 26 million, something like that. So we have that balance to strike, and this is a sector that has had no government support. Maybe that will change in the future, but I think it's what it needs to change because governments always have a role in building out the vital infrastructure for a country, whether it's a road network, a grid network, or whatever it is. And in this case, it's an electric car charging network that I think is vital to the electrification of transport and the fight against climate change. So I hope that we get some support before long. But other than that, we carry on and we're doing what we can do.
So we've got 15 minutes left. Hello to the 150 plus people watching on Facebook, and thanks to the people who registered and are in the Zoom room. Keep getting your questions in. We are going to be finishing promptly at 2 because we've got to go and see a TV crew to do some filming, socially distanced, of course. I can promise you that. Here is a question which comes from our own social media superstar, Katrina, but it follows up from something earlier. She said it was a very interesting question about vaccines because usually they're tested on animals, so aren't technically vegan. Are you on board with the COVID-19, any potential COVID vaccine, Dale, and would you roll them out to staff if the opportunity arises?
Yeah, we would, because we've had flu vaccines in the past for our staff. We've made them available. I haven't had one myself, but we made them available to people that wanted them. And absolutely, I mean, the COVID virus is more dangerous. So yes, once it's there, we'll make it available, definitely.
Shout out to Harry Barry Smith, who likes to know if you still live in a fire engine.
No, I don't, but I used to. I think I lived in that fire engine for maybe 5 years or something. It was one of a really exotic range of things that I lived in: a helicopter support vehicle, a couple of buses, a couple of ambulances as well, actually, a bender, all sorts of stuff. But no, Harry, I don't.
More of a statement, but this makes me feel happy. I've adopted Forest Green Rovers as my second club that I support purely based on the environmental ethos. It's great to see this message as a part of mainstream sports, and that's from Nick Day.
Thank you, Nick. Yeah, I mean, that goes to the point I was making earlier. What really excites me about our foreign fan base is exactly that people are, bonding with the club because of our stance on the environment. And that gives us a great potential, I think, to bring some change to the world.
Lee Stewart says, have any other football clubs taken on your ideas to improve their carbon footprint?
Yeah, I would say so. I think Arsenal signed a green electricity deal last year sometime. Chelsea, just before the lockdown, launched a vegan-only food outlet. We had some good conversations with Norwich around the stuff that we're doing. Talked to the England groundskeeper about going organic, all sorts of stuff really, but not just in football, rugby, cricket, and obviously through the UN, sports clubs and bodies around the world. So yeah, I would say yes.
Excellent. Next one is how do Forest Green Rovers benefit from your innovative thinking? I didn't post that.
Yeah, what can I say? We think of things frequently before anybody else does. If you look at our work in energy from probably 1991 in renewable energy, before it was remotely a kind of given. It's a mainstream technology now. Our work in electrification of cars began in the early 2000s. That's now mainstream. And our campaigning for a vegan diet, that's been going on for a long time as well. And, that's probably the best example of something that's most recently become almost ubiquitous as a concept. And I think we benefit from being ahead of the curve there, but that's not our purpose, because our purpose in life is not to make money, it's to bring change. And so we talk about these things not because we think we can be first and benefit from being first, but we talk about them because they need to be talked about and we need to help make them happen. That's what we do.
We've got around 10 minutes left, so get your question in now. If you want to ask Dale a question. One from Jasper on your Facebook page, Dale. What are you doing with the UN, Dale?
Well, our work with the UN goes back a couple of years, and they first reached out to us to talk about a program they wanted to put together, which really was to deliver a lot of the things that Forest Green had done. It ended up being called Sport for Climate Action as a program. Forest Green Rovers are a founding signatory, and I'm a climate champion of that program. And the idea is to engage sports, organizing bodies and clubs and fans, crucially, around the world in the fight against climate change. And to do that by communicating about the kinds of things that sports bodies can do and that sports fans can do at home. It's not any more complicated than that. But there are billions of sports fans around the world, and the UN is like just a super big version of what we've been trying to do at Forest Green. It's an incredible platform for us to find ourselves on with our message around sustainability to a global audience of sports fans. And it's super exciting to be there and have that chance to communicate.
Everything has just gone and disappeared from my screen, so give me 2 seconds whilst I find the next question. Oh, here's a good one. This is from Michael at the University of Leipzig, or Leipzig. I'm sorry, Michael. My pronunciations of German places aren't perfect, but Dale probably knows more about Germany than me because he spent some time there. FGR, you have lots of partners in the private sector. Are you going to share your experience in sustainability with them and other clubs?
Yeah, totally. I mean, we're completely open to sharing that. We frequently have other clubs come to see us on a match day or a non-match day. We show them around, tell them everything that we're doing, and we're completely open to that. We are working at the moment on a case study because we just don't have one. And one of the kind of opportunities that we've taken from the lockdown is to find a little bit of time and the right person actually to help us write this case study, somebody that we met through the UN. And we'll publish that far and wide. And it will just be to show people what we've done at Forest Green, how it works, and how it applies to just about everybody and every sports organisation on the planet. So yeah, we're totally open to that.
Here's a question from Facebook from Tim Chancellor. EDF are helping people to buy electric vehicles. Will Ecotricity do something similar?
Sorry, I missed the first part of that. EDF are encouraging people, did it
or
say?
helping, he's saying helping. So helping people to buy electric vehicles. Will Ecotricity be doing something similar?
We've been encouraging people to buy electric vehicles since about 2010. I don't know if EDF are giving people money. I don't think they probably are. So I'm not quite sure how they're helping people. Maybe it's with an electric vehicle tariff. We have one of those. So I don't quite know what they're doing, but we do everything that we can do to encourage people and enable people to have electric cars.
Here's a popular one. We've had this from a lot of people now. What is Dale's view on 5G, and will EcoTalk ever offer a 5G tariff?
Yeah, 5G. Let me say right at the start, I don't have a mobile phone. And I think that's important for me to say that. I'm not a technophobe, but I worry about the proximity of the signals to my head if I'm to use a phone, and I do occasionally when I'm out somewhere with you, Will. You'll know that I speak to somebody on a mobile phone, and so I kind of avoid that kind of stuff anyway. I've read up about 5G. I've tried to find the evidence that says 5G is this big, obvious danger, and I can't find it. On the contrary, it looks like a weaker signal, such that we have to have many more repeaters around to carry the signal, and I'm just not seeing it. So I've got no position against 5G, but I have a general aversion to having things like that close to me because I think that. As a species, we've probably not recognized the risk of that enough, and it's become prevalent. Mobile phones have become prevalent, and I think maybe in 10 or 20 years' time, we might find ourselves at a place where we can see the damage that's being done. I don't know. But until then, everybody uses them. Everybody uses 4G, 1G, 2G, 3G, 4, and now 5. I'm not seeing the difference.
From that one to this one, which is more of a comment from Michael Stanners. I'm an FGR supporter from Suffolk. I can't get to every game, but I listen online to Bob Hunt. He's the best comedy you can get in football. Bloke's a legend.
Yeah, he is a legend. There's no doubt about it. One of the things I'm hoping will come out of this predicament at the moment, if we get to restart our season, and in any event, when we start the new season, is live streaming of games in England. That's not currently allowed. And I think it's because of fear that it reduces gates at clubs at our level. I think that's misplaced. And I think we'll get to try that. And because I hold it to be a fact that we have fans all over the country and they can't come to games. And if they could tune in to a live game for a £5 or a £10, I think they would. And we won't see a reduction in gates as a consequence, because it's very different to watch a game in person to watching it on a screen. So I hope that we get to try that. And yeah, Bob Hunt, yeah, he's a legend. I love his Wembley quote. I don't know if you guys have heard it. Many of you guys have heard it, but we should have it on our website somewhere, because he was live on the radio and he just listed maybe 3 clubs. One included Swindon, I think it was, and he said next season you'll be eating hummus. I think he pronounced it, because Forest Green are in the Football League. It was an amazing, powerful kind of off the cuff kind of thing that he said. It's painted on the wall of our football club. Yeah, he's a legend.
We have fed him humus, as he called it, since that point, and I think he quite enjoyed it, actually. 5 minutes left, still got a chance to get some questions and bits and pieces in. This is one from Paul Quick. Companies working from home have seen huge reductions in their carbon footprint. Should this be the new way for all businesses?
Yeah, I think it should. I think we have to find a balance. At the moment, we don't have the balance, of course, because we've all just had to work from home. Obviously, unless our job is somewhere else, like driving a bus or in a hospital or something like that. And millions of people are still working in those jobs. But in all other respects, all office jobs are piled home, for example. So one of the things that we're intent on doing coming out the other side of this is to learn from the experience of what it's like to work from home across different areas of our company, different functions. We can see different effectiveness of that, but we can see the benefits for people of not having to travel to work and back and missing the rush hour and that kind of stuff. There's a quality of life benefit that does actually knock on into work as well. You know, the ability to focus and get work done. I think it's a great benefit, and it's one of the great things to come out of this virus crisis. And there have been a few. You know, for years, environmentalists talked about working from home as a big part of the answer. But we as a company, you know, would have been one of the first to adopt that had we the time to spare to think about it and try it. But we never found the time to do that, and we have now. And when we come out the other side, I think one of the things we'll do is try to strike a balance for people. So we might have 2 weeks on and 2 weeks off, where people that want to can work from home for 2 weeks and then come to the office for 2 weeks, so that we get the best of both worlds. Because working from home can be really good. But if you do it for too long, it's really isolating, and being at the office is better. And it's also better for some things. So we've got to blend the two. And I think there will be a big change. Certainly here at Ecotricity, we will embrace that change. We will make sure that it endures.
Yes, thank you very much for that. We've got a couple more minutes left, and what we might do, because we've now had a sudden influx of questions, we might try and do a video with Dale to answer some of these questions at a later date. So thank you everybody for sending in hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of questions. Bill Simmons, who's been an EV correspondent with us through this, he said Boris Johnson announced £1 billion worth of support for EV infrastructure today in PMQs. What do you think of that?
Oh, it was today, was it?
Yeah, apparently.
Oh right, because sorry, I was laughing because we've heard it before. Several times before. It's the same billion that keeps getting recycled. So maybe that's what's happened today. I don't know. I'm going to have to go away and read the news. I mean, it might be exciting, but it might not be. But it's exactly the kind of thing we need to do, as I mentioned earlier. The infrastructure required for the whole nation to be running around in electric cars, 26 million cars, is enormous. It's not just about pumps on the main roads and the motorways. It's about the grid infrastructure. We almost have to build another national grid to make that happen. So it does require government intervention. So fingers crossed, I'll go read the news and see if it's real.
Statement here from Paul Yude. I'd be up for watching online for a £5. Bring it on, Dale. And then the final question for now, and like I said, thank you everybody for all your hundreds of questions. We will try and get to a few more of them and answer them. And if you've enjoyed this, do let us know afterwards, and we'll try and do another one of these because I think Dale quite likes the Zoom format, and we've got into these video conferences over the last few weeks, and it felt like time to do one for Ecotricity. What positives in energy and plant-based diet do you hope will come out of this corona situation?
I think mostly it's the opportunity that we can see. So the two big changes I see from the virus are the amount of money that's suddenly become available to spend on something that's perceived to be important and an imminent threat to us. £330 billion has been committed to fighting the virus this year. That is a 10-year zero carbon budget for the entire country. And at the same time, it's had a dramatic impact on the way we live. Lockdown has been a huge impact on the way we live our lives. So at the other side of this, to fight the climate crisis, we don't need anything but fractions of both of those. We need fractions of that sum of money every year. We need fractions of that change of behavior from us all to fight the climate crisis. So I'm really hopeful that we can look back at this and point at it and say, look what we were capable of when we could see in an imminent existential threat, a threat to life. Climate change is way bigger than that, but it's less imminent. And we've just got to change that perspective and show, we're capable of doing this. And in energy, it's, we're at 30% renewable energy. We can get to 100%. It's totally within our grasp in terms of technology and economics. We just have to stop bunging money into subsidizing fossil fuels. And plant-based living, it's inherently economic. It's much cheaper to eat plants, to grow plants for people than it is to try and grow animals. Much cheaper, much cleaner, much safer, much healthier. I mean, the virus itself, we haven't touched upon this, but the virus itself is one of those zoonotic viruses that's crossed from animals to humans. There are 143 known to be in existence. They keep occurring. 8 times as many of those come from farmed animals, from the intensive farming industry, as they do from all other animals. So factory farming is driving not just the climate crisis, but it's at the root of some of these virus crises that we've had. This isn't the first one. This is just the biggest for some time. So I'm hopeful that we'll learn a lot from this and make some big changes.
Thanks very much, Dale. Any last thoughts or comments for everybody that's been tuning in?
No, I'd just like to say thank you, actually. I can't see everybody, but I want to thank you all for joining in. Thank you for the questions that I got to answer and the questions that I didn't get to answer, and wish you all well. Thank you.
Thank you very much. A new episode of Dale's podcast, Zero Carbonista, will be available next Monday. There's 14 episodes of that available on all good and some bad podcast suppliers. You can go and get them online now. And we'll update you with more events like this on Facebook and other social media soon. Thanks very much for watching. Have a good afternoon.